So, there are a lot of weapons in Skyrim, from the conventional like a big old sword that is on fire to the less conventional like a butter knife. And then there are the tool-like weapons whose purpose is not for combat but rather environmental interaction, such as the pickaxe for mining a stone, woodcutter axe for while chopping wood, and an item that is not supposed to be used for any form of combat, the torch. Only an insane person would try to use this weapon as a primary form of attack. Thankfully, that is what I'm here for, as today we will attempt to beat Skyrim with the torch. So how exactly do you use a torch as a weapon? Isn't it supposed to just light up dark places only? Yep, but it has a lesser known function where you can block bash with it to deal minuscule amounts of damage, which unfortunately for me means I'll be stuck using it. As for the rules for this challenge, my main one is that I can only use the torch as my main weapon, and that's it. In my offhand, I can use healing spells, but really this is going to be a simple challenge. No companions as usual because they would out DPS me with a butter knife, and also no super major glitches in the sword. Since I'm going to be using a horrible weapon, no bonus objectives today. Nothing else to say, so let's get this misery started. So when creating my character, I went with the Red Guard today. I was flip-flopping between the Imperial and the Red Guard since they both serve the exact same purpose. I'm going to want a character that has a high block stat and also high destruction, and both are equal with their starting stats. I went with the Red Guard simply because I haven't gone with them yet in a run. I'll explain later for my reasoning on destruction. I went with as close to a flame on my head as I can, and originally I wanted to go with the Wood Elf just for the name, but I couldn't think of anything else. Just a shout out to the best spin-off from the best era of Doctor Who. As for the introduction, I got yelled at by a flying Deathclaw and ran to safety, and all I had to do was use said Deathclaw as a hurdle. Otherwise, the rest of the intro goes as normal. I'm getting pretty quick at this at least. As for heading on into the keep, I went with Roll-Off because I want armor today. I let the Imperials and Stormcloaks settle their differences as I loot their spawn location, then steal the captain's attire. I wanted to run light armor at first, but I'm going to need heavy armor just because I'm going to need to survive for more than a minute worth of attacks. Also on the walls, there are a bunch of torches, however they are welded on, and Skyrim exists before screwdrivers were invented, so I can't get my weapon yet. I looted what I could and not get gutted on my way out, got zapped in the butt, and the rest of the intro goes about how it normally goes for weapon restricted runs. Before too long, I am in the bright sunshine and I can get started on getting my weapon of the day. Only takes a few minutes since I want to get the warrior stone first because I really need block levels today. Up the road a little bit from the stones is Ember Shard Mines. I ignored the intro bandit and went inside. Right away I get my weapon and get to test it out on the bandit here. Besides my stamina draining rapidly, I wish the same could be said about the bandit. Anyways, a lot of torches here since the torches do break, like the only weapon in the entire game that does break in Skyrim. I tried to take on the two bandits here, but my DPS and stamina are so awful I say hell with it and bailed out of there. I might be back if I remember. Outside of the mines, I decided to have a go at some wolves, the basic weak enemies of Skyrim. It was miserable. Besides, I have no stamina to bash with. They take about 10 bashes of the torch to take down, and this is on normal. Yeah, this weapon sucks. Once you wolves were dealt with, I ran into Riverwood and harvested every vegetable not nailed down since vegetable soup is going to be mandatory for this run, since every encounter is going to last longer than the duration of Adrenaline Rush. Once I was done looting in the tutorial town, I went down the road a little bit towards Whiterun, stopping at the farm outside of town for more veggies, and the companions took down the giant. My doctor will be happy I'm eating more veggies instead of whatever junk food I eat at work when I don't get a break for an 8-hour shift. With a pocket full of stuff, I entered Whiterun to head to the market stall to get more veggies, mostly tomatoes. With enough stuff, I go to soup, then go on my usual adventures. My first adventure is going to be Solitude, after I get my lovely deposit box from the Khajiit. I entered Solitude and hurried to the Blue Palace with a helping of veggies on the side. I talked to Sybil here and trained my destruction up to level 30, and glitching my money back. I want level 30 destruction for the Augmented Flames perk, which boosts damage from fire-based attacks, which affects the torch. Sure, it takes the torch damage up from 5 to 6 or something very low like that, but I'm going to need all the damage I can get. I don't want to get to level 60 because if I power level too much then the enemies will outlevel my damage and ruin the run. After that, I continue my merry way getting more loot from the vendor chest to see me through much of the run for resources. Then I return to Whiterun not to go to Dragon's Reach, but instead head to Jorvaskr so I can join the companions. I'm not going to be doing the companions today, but rather I want to enlist Njada's services for block training. I head into the basement, sit through a boring conversation, then test my mettle against Vilkas, I think. I bash him a few times and somehow he lets me into the guild, despite doing next to no damage. After that was done, I did the usual meet and greet of the warriors, mostly doing errands for the characters until I can get the official join up. After quest complete, I can now start getting block training from Njada, which will help me get to level 50 for the Deadly Bashing perk. Also, while looking around, Ayla became one with the bench. Nothing else to do, I head into Dragon's Reach to get enchanting my gear as usual, then depart for the Barrow. So, despite taking my augmented flames perk, I don't notice much of a difference with the bandits here. I think it reduces the bashes required from 10 to 9, so I guess that helps. I guzzle some veggie soup so I can block bash the enemies to death, and often stun lock them so they can't do much to me, which is going to be the name of the game. I ignored the big group outside of the burrows since I don't fancy the gangbang treatment, and instead entered the dungeon. As for the interior, the duo at the start weren't really that much trouble. Eventually cooked both bandits to death so the skeevers have a nice meal. As for the outlaw further in, I was able to block bash him to death, but it took quite a long while to do so, plus he was pretty agile and weaved around a lot of my bashes. But after enough time he goes down and I can get deeper inside the dungeon. I roasted the skeevers alive, and despite them being trash mobs, they took some time to take down. There is a web further inside, and intuition says that a web could be burned down, but that makes too much sense, so I have to bring out a fist to open the way to the giant frostbite spider. The fight was actually pretty straightforward. Guzzled soup and backed the spider into a corner, and it's very susceptible to stagger, so I was able to stun lock it to death, just took quite a bit of time. As for Arvel, this guy is supposed to be easy to take down. No, it takes him several bashes to take down, but also he is a Dunmer and resistant to my main form of attack. After him came fun. My biggest weakness is multi-enemy encounters, so yeah, that sucks. I lured one Draugr to the wall of death, then plucked the rest off one at a time and they go down with relative ease. As for the next room, same story really. I was able to get the Draugr stun locked against the wall so they can't move. In about a minute each, they all go down with relative ease. Thank goodness for the power of soup. Further inside, I really wasn't in the mood for a threesome, so I lure the Draugr into the axe trap and that takes care of that mess. The rest of the dungeon is pretty straightforward since the Draugr are all alone. Well, all but the group before the boss, but they are also bunched up against another blade trap, so they are all chopped down to size. As for the Draugr Overlord, and my main plan for all the boss fights going forward is to pin them next to walls so I can repeatedly stun lock them to death. I bashed at the Overlord next to the pot and shelves and repeatedly bashed at him over and over and over and over and over and over. It took about a minute and a half of repeatedly bashing before the Draugr could go back to bed. Never got to use this infinitely better weapon on me. Then again, I think anything except for a fork is better. Back at Dragon's Reach, I just keep entering and exiting a door until I was told to fight a dragon, which I go and do. As for Mjolnir, the fight wasn't too bad all things considered. Well, I'm the weakest member of the bunch. Once the dragon lands, I could attempt to stun bash it. I say attempt because sometimes the dragon gets stunned and other times he still bites at my not so pristine body. I think the arrows were doing much more damage than I could. Well, I rally the peasants and the dragon goes down with relative ease. Well, after that battle, I go and do some shopping and make some more soup before heading out from Pelagia Farms. Next stop is going to be Ivarstead, but I take up Armin's request on a block level. I will take what I can get. On my way to the tower, I'm ambushed by quite a few wolves and a scavenger who hits pretty darn hard at this point. He drains my potion supply pretty quickly and took quite a while to get him backed into a rock where I could put his lights out. Now I can do some scavenging. As for Volthum Towers, I torched the intro bandit and had to deal with the bandit chief right afterwards and his friend. The chief was of higher concern, so I focused on him first and foremost, backing him into a corner since his friend was more or less tickling me at this point. Then I could pick off the remaining bandits one at a time. Before too long, the place was all cleaned out nice and easily and claimed Armin's sword back. I returned to Ratway and give Armin his sword back for a block level, then some resupplying before resuming my travels from the towers. I decided today to take the scenic route to Ivarstead, walk in there with my torch out to live the authentic role-playing experience, which got boring very quickly. Thankfully, Maik the Liar was there to lighten the mood. Always a treat to encounter. Also, along my travels to Ivarstead, I ran into a farmer who was going to join the Imperials. I put an end to that ambition. I'm not going to go to war, so this is the closest thing I'm going to do. Viva la Revolution or something. Also along my trails to the sky, besides getting lost along the way, I ran into a saber cat who was hitting extremely hard surprisingly. It took quite a few bashes to take down, and honestly compared to the no armor run, I'm taking way more damage despite being the same difficulty. The eye of the prize coming this way is the troll that lives along the riverbed here, which I'm planning on taking advantage of, and to see how things go against the frost troll higher up. Spoiler alert, I am doing nothing. Less than nothing in fact, but I'm still getting block experience at least. So like any Fire Emblem enjoyer, I take advantage of this and boss abuse the troll until I can get close to level 50 block. I was taking quite a bit of damage, but that is the benefit of kiting it around is for. Eventually I lose track, get close enough to level 50 and lead the troll into Ivarstead. Well, the troll takes out one person and almost another, plus a guard. I enjoy letting evil critters take on towns. I return to Jorvaskr after this to get the rest of the way to level 50, and then take the deadly block skill so I can do one more point of damage. With my block where I want it, plus I don't want to level up any more for the rest of the run, I decided to head to Dawnstar to hike up to the Lordstone. Along my journey there, I wanted to attack the Vigilance of Stendarr, but seems I missed the party. But at least they are carrying more torches, better armor, and potions, so it wasn't a complete waste. During my journey up to the Lordstone, I came across an Ice Wolf, so I guess I can see what my maximum DPS will be for the run. Yeah, this ain't it, Chief. The wolf does hit somewhat hard, but it takes a long while to go down, and I really can't up my DPS at this point. So from this point on, I'm going to be avoiding combat encounters when I can. While I torch the bandit camp at the top, all in the name of the Lord. I then returned to Iverstead to climb up to the Beards. First enemy on the way was a frostbite spider, and not the easy kind either. I couldn't burn its house down, so I just let it be and ran further up the mountain. I also took the time to pick a torch off of one of the pilgrims, a fine addition to my collection. I continued to avoid everything on my way up the mountain, well except for one frost wolf trying to bite at my not-so-cake. I just avoided the frost troll here. If I can't harm a regular troll, what hope do I have against the icy variety? At the Boomers, I indulge them on their little activities like insulting ancestors and running through slalom gates until I can get the mission to go to Uson Grav. On my way there, I ran into the duo of bandits that gave me trouble last run, and lo and behold, they are still giving me grief. So I decided to bail out of there and lead them down the road, hopefully to some guards. Along the way, I led them into Stone Hills to hope that the folks can shank them to death. Yeah, the bandits effortlessly slaughtered the population and resumed their attention onto me. Further down the road a bit, at this point I was going to lead the group into Morthal, and at this point I think the duo could actually slaughter the entire town by themselves. A group of Imperials joined in on the brawl, and I watched as the thug soloed 2 soldiers by himself, but he was also by himself so I could actually take him on. Another soldier came out of nowhere with a staff of sparks the other bandit was using and finished off the bandit thug. I wanted that staff today, and sure as hell I'm going to pry it off of his dead body. Guess I didn't need Morthal after all. I continued on my journey into Uson Grav, and had to contend with a bunch of bandits outside plus a necromancer. I needed to get rid of this lot if I want to fast travel after the dungeon. I did my best to get close to the necromancer, but the group continued to give me trouble and provided good coverage. Like any competent party, protect the squishy, and they did a good job at that too, especially after the necromancer was next to death. I thought I was going to die, but an unlikely hero came to my rescue. A baby mud crab. I repay its kindness, then enter Uson Grav. So for Uson Grav, I wanted to play pacifist from here on out because I can't handle group encounters, and that is what the first encounter of the dungeon is, and oh boy. There is also a little battle up ahead where the necromancers fight Draugr, and today for the first time in history the necromancers come out on top, so I have an army of dancers coming right after me, and they continue to add to their fold. I thought I could lead them to future Draugr encounters, but they would keep on getting stronger, so I went deeper inside, where they also followed me. Eventually I was able to lose them by the time I got to the boners. Thankfully they are spread apart so I could pick them off one at a time. While I was here I grabbed my pacifism shout, which will help me out a lot for future dungeon dives. And after that I just ran right through the second half of the dungeon, fisting the spiderwebs until I got a piece of paper I threw into my fire to keep it lit longer. Then I left Uson Grav. But on my way out the necro dancers tried to ambush me, but I got the hell out of there before they could do anything too rash. Back in Riverwood it is another story of the underdog coming out on top. I was met by 2 cultists and I was hoping the guards here could take them down, but they immediately killed Alvor and his wife and they were able to take on the guards here with little fuss. Well, the minor cultist went down, but the other one was able to kill a couple more by himself. But the biggest flaw at this point was that the cultist failed to acknowledge that he was by himself, so I pressed him next to a house and burnt him to a crisp. Thank goodness this is a video game without any immersive mods installed, or else I think Fondle's house would have burned down. Well, I repaid Alvor's kindness by throwing him and his wife into the forge to keep it warm. Inside the inn, I talked to the most despised innkeep about attic rooms and dragons before the second dragon fight. Since I have a few major pains in the butt coming soon, I did an upgrade on my armor. I have been slapping on Fortify one-handed on my gear even though I don't think it makes much of a difference. I will take anything at this point. I traveled to Windhelm to begin Salakanir, and oh boy, this dragon fight sucked, more than usual. So during the fight, Delphine was late to the party, so I was by myself with the dragon. No ranged capabilities. That and the dragon was in the sky much more often than usual, and burning through my health pretty quickly. Early on in the fight, I decided to descend down the mountain to lead the dragon back to a town so the guards can join in on the fun. Further down the road from Kynes Grove, Delphine finally decided to show up, and importantly take the heat off of me. With her damage, the fight would speed up considerably. Normally the dragon would want to hang out in the ground, but not today. Eventually it stayed on the ground long enough for me to stunlock it, somewhat. It was still able to bite me, but Delphine was able to focus down the worm for us to claim victory. I am dreading Alduin. So next up is the Thalmor Embassy, which is the segment I am dreading the most for the run. So I take some time to resupply, get more veggies and soup, and also more potions since I'm starting to run low at this point, and to drag my feet a bit more, I decided to head to Winterhold to get Aftan done and dusted. Anything to drag my feet with the annoying elves. I hopped across the ice to talk to the mad scientist about getting some keys to his mushroom farm, then walked towards Aftan. On my way there, I thought in my smooth brain way I could take on a vampire and her death hound. Yeah, the fight was annoying, mostly having to contend with two of them. Well, both of them are weak to fire attacks, so I stood a better chance than usual. I created some distance where the hound followed and I could finish it off. Then came the vampire. I pinned her next to a rock until she was low in health and kept on vanishing to dip from the fight and healing herself. Eventually I was able to kill her, but I had to return to Whiterun to get rid of my vampire disease. I don't want the run to suck any more than it needs to. As for Aftan, the place is about how it normally goes for me. Run past everything and become a ghost if any robots get too close for comfort, and along the way I do pick up some more torches, and I just walk my way through the rest of the dungeon. The second portion I took the scenic route down. By scenic I mean fall down looking at all the scenery I'm skipping along the way. I ignored the big brute and his friends, and also the shield bashing lady, and headed right into Blackreach. Inside the big mushroom trip, I took my usual route through the place, ignoring everyone here because I don't want to be here for more than an hour just on the simplest of Thalmor. And that is just the first part I run into any trouble. As for the TB factory, I find a skeleton on the floor who died trying to figure out the puzzle. If you die trying to figure out how to push buttons, you are destined for the Darwin Award, especially one this simple. Anyways, I grab my divine TP, so now I can crap myself getting through the embassy. Before the embassy, I do a shopping trip getting me an upgrade to my armor and also getting a health enchantment I can stick on some gear, because if I'm going up against an army of Thalmor, I'm going to need to be able to take a lot of hits. I enchanted up my new stuff, then gave the new stuff to Malborn so I can betray him in the embassy. I talked to Delphine to begin hell. As for the embassy itself, I have no idea what my game plan was. I think it had something to do with Leroy. I decided to sprint my way through the first 3 sections of the embassy, and I guess everyone was hot in my tail, and followed me into the jail. Malborn followed me as well as I led everyone around the embassy in a wild goose chase and was gutted immediately. I led a couple Thalmor outside that I could pick off one at a time, so slightly less headaches. I was able to return inside the Stolar and find a lone Thalmor to take out, so slowly thinning out the herd. So in my infinite wisdom I thought, sure, 4 angry high elves I could take on at once. But I couldn't, so I led them all into a lone room, which I could funnel them in one at a time, or more about 3 or so at a time, but no Relindle thankfully. I banked to level up for this purpose, then started flailing like a desperate fish out of water trying to hit someone. I kept swinging, using up my dwindling healing supplies until one Thalmor went down. Thankfully she had the key needed so I can bail out of the embassy. So during my escape, the remaining Thalmor gave chase to a lunatic either ballsy enough or stupid enough to attack a stronghold of high elves with nothing but a torch and a soup store's worth of soup and the clothes on his back. They followed me into the Frost Troll's cavern, and they thought, sure, why not, let's attack an angry Frost Troll. Yeah, the Frost Troll was more than capable enough to get the high elves. Robes don't protect the squishy parts of you. Yeah, I know better than to pick a fight with that, so I bailed back to Riverwood. Back inside the hub town, I did some resupplying at Lucan, getting some gold in the process, and also got a few potions. I talked to Delphine, then returned to Whiterun to finish getting resupplied. I took the time to craft a crapload of soup to get me through the rest of the run, then I proceeded to burn Nazim since he got off scot-free for too many runs in a row. After that I returned to Riften to immediately burn the witch at the stake. As for the Ratways, I don't want to fight down here, so I ignored them all and entered the flagon. Gian and a lowlife followed me in, and felt the wrath of the Thieves Guild. I love chaos. As for the rest of the Ratways, I ignored the Thalmor and ran right to Esbern, but not before giving the chef some flame for his food. During the escape, everyone down here wanted the Thalmor dead, and the tank was able to stunlock a wizard while the rest of the group were able to chop him to death. As for the escape, I just wanted to get the hell out of there, so I ignored all the Thalmor and ran right to the exit. The wizards followed me through both the flagon and the Ratways, so I just booked it outside. Thankfully the game didn't crash here, and also on our way out I got into a flame war with Shivari, and came out on top. Of course, Esbern just blasted her right through the fence. Back at Riverwood, I thought it could be cheeky and do some speed tech to skip Esbern's dialogue and go right to Skyhaven Temple, but when I departed to Skyhaven, neither Esbern nor Delphine were following me, and when I got inside Carspire, neither were to be found. I sprinted my way through the place, and they weren't there at the end with the blood seal. Of course, just a lot of confused Forceborn, so I had to reload back to the end so I could talk to Esbern and do things the proper way. I guess this is what happens when you don't look at speedrun for 6 years. Second trip to Carspire, things were a little more interesting this time around. A group of Thalmor were escorting a prisoner, so why not? Let's have some fun. I gave the prisoner some weapons to see what he can do. Didn't last too long, but Delphine and Esbern were more than able to slaughter the group with little fuss. I wish I could do the same. Anyways, I watched the dragon poof into existence and entered Carspire. Delphine and Esbern followed me inside the dungeon. We slaughtered the Forsworn here with relative ease. I tried to have a 1v1 duel with the Briarheart, but Delphine sped up the fight considerably. After that was all done, it was more simple puzzles, using my torch to cauterize my wound, then entering Skyhaven Temple. Here I make a final upgrade to my armor with the Blade's armor, then talk to Esbern about how to finish the run up before too long since we have been going at this misery for far too long. Delphine suggests I should talk to the much better faction to finish the run. Before the final battles, I enchanted my Blade's armor with some enchantments, and at this point, I am ready to finish this run, so time to put it into high gear. I return to the booming voices, get Haze into the group, then get my Clear Skies shout so I'd have soft lock prevention for Sovngarde. I yelled at the clouds and avoided every enemy on my climb up to the Sky Plumber. He tells me that the answer is in the toilet paper, so I pull it out to take some notes. So now for the fight you've all been waiting for. If I'm struggling with all the fights so far, how do I fare against Alduin? I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Alduin 1 was the easiest part of the run. Somehow. Don't get me wrong, the fight is extremely time consuming because Alduin has thousands of health while I only do single digit damage at a time. The reason this fight was easy is because Alduin kept on going for the meteor shout, which you can get stunned out of. So I would shout, spam bashing until Dragon Ren was off cooldown, then repeat. At one point during the fight, my torch extinguished because I was in too much of a groove, but I have 8 more for this exact reason. And at this point, once I got back into the rhythm, the fight continued as it did. I was never in danger for this fight, it was just an extremely time-consuming process. The fight ended up taking 9 minutes, which is just enough time for vegetable soup to do its job. I am damn surprised it only took 9 and not 19 minutes, but oh well. He ran away to Sovngarde in absolute shame because he was defeated by a bloody torch and called easy. Well, I guess at this point, time to start wrapping up the run because it's in the bag. I talked to the dragon, then the Jarl of Whiterun, then the Greybeards, then Tullius, then Ulfric so they can bicker at each other for seasons unending because that is how long this quest feels. One of the worst quests in Skyrim. At one point I almost fell asleep because of how exciting the gameplay is. Eventually everyone decides to listen to common sense and I could get Odovig's cell phone number. I called him in the middle of his nap, which he retaliates by dropping in on one of the guards unexpectedly, then gives me a ride to Skuldolphin. I do excel at single target encounters, but as soon as 2 or more foes show up, I am screwed. So I just become ethereal throughout the entire dungeon. Sure, it was interesting having to avoid enemies while solving puzzles, but since I have been through this place more than enough, I could avoid every enemy along the way. Also, moving pillars and jumping over spiders isn't the most fun thing to do at the same time. Second part, they begin to lose interest as I started to climb stairs, and before too long I was met with the Overlord, so I thought it would be another easy encounter. Nah, seems the Restless Draugr really wanted my butt today, so I had 2 enemies to deal with. Thankfully, the Restless Draugr ran into a trap beforehand, and was close enough to death so a few more bashes finished it off. Then I could refocus my attention to the Overlord. With some more well-timed bashes, he could be brought back to bed. Back outside, I sprinted into the portal because like hell am I going to be able to kill all the Draugr, dragons, and an Angi priest at the same time. As for Sovngarde, I still had some soup active, so I was able to sprint my way across the Soon a little bit quicker than usual. Soon was really the last tough spot because he could head further away than I could with my flaming stick. I had to use up a few of my potions just trying to close the gap and came pretty close to death, but in Soon's arrogance he backed himself onto a bone, which means I could effortlessly stun lock him to death. Eventually Soon fell to embarrassment and let me across the bridge. I too would be ashamed if I lost a 1v1 to a sparkler. I made it inside the Hall of Valor and got my endgame party, then used my Fire Emblem torch to good effect burning away the fog. Once Alduin had enough and wanted round 2, first round didn't count, I stood next to Soon as a beacon for meteors to attack me. Listen, I have horrible DPS and I need all the help I can get. Eventually Soon was brought into the picture. The rest of the fight went by pretty easily. I couldn't stunlock Alduin sadly because NPCs have the ability to push Alduin around, but then again, he is a pushover as it is. Also because he kept moving around, I couldn't reach him easily, but I mean, with 4 friends doing the carrying, Alduin isn't going to last. Eventually he landed for good, and the group was able to whack the worm to death, and I could light the bonfire, letting Alduin explode from shame, and proving that you can beat Skyrim with a torch. However, that does not mean you should beat Skyrim with a torch. Oh crap, I forgot, Ember Shard Mines. Well, as for my thoughts on the run, don't. The DPS is horrible, and the fact I had to use an exploit through the entire run just so I could actually do something is indicative to how awful the weapon actually is. Plus the stuns are not fully guaranteed. The 1v1 encounters are manageable enough, just very time consuming and fights would last upwards to a minute to 3 minutes. However, when you bring in another enemy into the picture, plus you are locked in place when you're doing the bash, I can't really chase after the enemies or dodge attacks, so I end up taking a lot of damage. I do think it was a good idea to invest in the perks that I did, but in the long run, I don't think it made much of a difference. 1 times 5 damage is just 5 damage, and if I were to try to invest way heavy into destruction to try to increase that 5 to 6, then I would be having to contend with enemies with 10 times the health of a basic Draugr, and encounters would be much more annoying, difficult, time-consuming, and less enjoyable. Well, I'm done with this mess. Time to go back to never using torches. Light bad for sneak builds. For the next run, there might be a break before then. Work has been very busy lately, plus I should work on myself a little bit more this summer, given how dark the world has been. Hopefully you'll enjoy this video. If you did, be sure to give a like, subscribe for more masochism, and any other ways I could torture myself, leave them down below. This has been Orpheolus, and see you all next time.